Okay. All right, everyone. So welcome to Knowledge at Noon. This is Building Products with AI. I am joined today with our faculty member, Craig Butler. He is an instructor here for the Certificate in Product Management here at Georgetown School of Continuing Studies, and specifically for our professional development certificates. Craig is a cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure professional specializing in DevOps and incident response management with a background in business and network administration. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Craig here, and welcome and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate that great intro. Give me just a second while I share my slides. Does that look good? All right, awesome. Welcome to this Knowledge at Noon chat. Going to be talking a little bit about building products with AI. Most of my images that throughout this presentation were actually generated with AI, DALL-E and Midjourney. So we can talk a little bit about the capabilities of those as we go through. I find that Midjourney is better at these kind of like landscape epic portraits, epic scenes. Whereas DALL-E is a little bit better for smaller scale cute stuff, but your mileage may vary. Everybody has a little bit of a different experience with these. So yeah, let's dive in. As Jonathan said, I'm Craig Butler. I've been teaching the product management certificate course here at Georgetown SCS since 2019. We have another one of those classes coming up next week. There's still time to sign up for that if you're interested. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. Been doing software engineering, systems administration, networking, cybersecurity stuff for the last 20 years or so. I prefer not to get too specific about how long it's been. It's been a while. And I have a background in business, MBA from Azusa Pacific University and Bachelors of Business from the University of New Mexico. You can find me on LinkedIn at Craig A. Butler if you're interested. A couple disclaimers for today's talk. I am not an expert on AI and machine learning technologies. Most of what I'll be talking about today here is a high-level overview of the technologies to the depth that I do understand them, and then going from that into talking about how we can use these technologies in products, or how we might not be able to use them in products. Second disclaimer, I can't predict the future. We're still in the very early days of these technologies. We don't know where this is going and what might come of it. So anything I say here should be taken with a massive grain of salt, because something could come out tomorrow or next week that completely changes everything again. So it's a very fast-moving, very exciting time for these technologies. But on the plus side, although I can't predict the future, nobody else can either. So I look forward to being proven wrong. So right now there's a lot of hype around what's called generative AIs. These are the systems like Midjourney, like DALL-E, like ChatGPT, Bard from Google, that are capable of creating new media products, whether those be images, whether they be text. For the most part today, we'll be talking about the text transformer technologies, because that's what's really captured a lot of the imagination right now. But the image generating AIs are really interesting too, and I expect to see a whole variety of audio based generative AI technologies coming out in the near future, as well as video coming out in the near future. So these technologies, as I said, are in the very early days, and there could be a whole lot more coming out in the near future that we can't even predict today. And as a result, kind of the inspiration for this talk is, I know a lot of product managers out there are getting asked by their boss, how can we work AI into our products? How can we, be using AI and things? And the first note I'd like to say is a note of caution. Let us remember that it was only a year and a half ago that those same bosses were asking, how can we work blockchain into these same products? How can we move everything to blockchain? And well, nobody says that anymore. Now AI is the new hot thing. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, who benefits from all of this hype? The answer is the AI companies themselves, right? They have a kind of a built-in incentive to hype up these products and say, these are going to change the world. They're going to revolutionize everything. get on board with our product now. And that also helps raise their stock price, which helps them raise a whole lot of money. And so I included in this slide a reminder of the Long Island iced tea company and how they boosted their stock price by triple in a single day, simply by changing their name to the Long Blockchain Corp. And I expect to see a lot of that in the near future too. I expect to see a lot of companies changing their name to Bob's AI Workshop or whatever, just to get that same kind of benefit. So beware of the hype. Going into the text generators, there's a well-known effect in the computer science world called the ELIZA effect. And this comes from the original chatbot, the very first chatbot program called ELIZA, developed at MIT in 1966. It was designed to emulate a therapist in the Carl Rogers style of therapy. Carl Rogers believed in a lot of active listening, a lot of repeating back to clients what they were saying, and just being very open, having unconditional positive regard, and remaining very neutral. So it was a kind of an easy thing to try and simulate, because basically what ELIZA does is just rephrases and repeats back the things that you're saying, and then asks follow-up questions trying to elicit you to say more things. And you can find many ports of ELIZA on the internet. This is one I found from Cal State Fullerton's site department, and you can have a little chat with it. By the standards of today's AI chatbots, of course, ELIZA is extremely primitive, and you'd find it hard to think that anyone could be convinced that you were talking to any kind of a real mental creation here, because its responses are they feel a little bit formulaic and a little bit canned, and it could be a lot better. But at the time when this came out in 1966, nobody was used to talking on computers, sending direct messages and all this kind of thing. And something that was noticed right away is that users immediately began to ascribe motivation, intelligence, thought behind ELIZA's responses, and to share really deep personal things with the chatbot. It was a fascinating result from the experiments, and has been written about in computer science literature ever since. So if you're interested in reading about that, just Google the ELIZA effect and you'll immediately find pages on it. So this illustrates, one of the key dangers of AIs, especially these text transformer models, which is anthropomorphization, right? Like, we as humans have a tendency built into us to try to recognize motivation and intention behind other, the movements and behaviors of other objects and creatures in the world. And so it can be very easy to fool us into thinking that we are talking to something that has a real mind and has a real thought process, when in fact it does not. So there's a really great blog post by I think he's a computer scientist named Stefano Quintarelli, who proposes a sort of a antidote to the hype and to the anthropomorphization of AIs, which is, instead of calling them AIs, because artificial intelligence or AI is automatically kind of a priming terminology, right, that gets you thinking in those terms, reminds you of all the sci-fi you've ever seen that had a computer that talked in it, or the Terminator or whatever. So just calling it AI is kind of setting the context of the conversation to a certain place, which definitely benefits the companies that are building these tools, because it makes you think that that's what it is. So he proposes, substitute instead systematic approaches to learning algorithms and machine interfaces, or SALAMI. And when you do this, it really helps kind of contextualize some of the more hyped up things that people are saying. Will salami take over the world? Can a salami fall in love? Am I going to lose my job to salami? So I found this to be a really good way of resetting the level of the conversation when it starts to get a little too out of control. So let's talk about what these tools really are. In keeping with what I just said about the term AI and artificial intelligence, I think it's helpful to talk about them in terms of the actual tools that these are, which are language models. Now, what is a language model? At the basic level, a language model is something that interprets or generates language based on some kind of process. right? The very first language model ever devised, what we recognize today as a language model, was a thought experiment by Claude Shannon back in 1948 or 49. What he did was he just went to his bookshelf, pulled out a book, opened to a random page, and found the word "the." And then he put that book back and picked another random book, opened to a random page, looked for the word "the," and then looked at the word after it, and then wrote that down. And by continuing to do that, created entire sentences. He'd just pick a word to start with, go to the bookshelf, find that word, see the word after it, and go on. And since then, there have been many language models that have been built in that. In fact, most language models that have been built since then are those n-gram type models. N-gram meaning n number of words, gram being the word for word. So, you can build these tools like Markov chains are a technology that does this, where you say, okay, given this corpus that I'm going to feed into the model, tell me what the most probable word is after one word, after one instance of this word, or after these 2 words in a row, or after these 3 words in a row. Perfect example of this too would be, everybody's played that game on your phone where you use the autocorrect and you type a word, and then whatever the second option is, you click that, and you just keep clicking that until it becomes something ridiculous. That's exactly what a language model is. And I asked Bard what a language model is, and it gave me this pretty good definition. Language models are a type of statistical model that predicts the next word in a sequence. They're trained on a large corpus of text, and they can be used to generate text, translate languages, and answer questions. It's not a bad definition of what a language model is. Interestingly, when I asked Midjourney and DALL-E to build me a workflow diagram of how language models work, I got some very interesting results. They're not quite up to the task yet of building flow charts and workflow diagrams that make any sense. So this is a little bit of what I was just talking about. Major types of language models. N-gram models are the sort of old style, straightforward, just predicting based on sequences of words. And now what we're seeing is these neural language models that are using machine learning and deep learning to process vast corpuses of text, such as the entire internet, through their neural language model to create these large language models that we see today. So given that these models are predictive text generators, the whole purpose of them is to based on text that they have read and that they have access to, predict the next word in the sequence that would come out of this. There's a variety of great applications for these. I included a rubber duck here because there are tools for helping software developers like Copilot. And what I've found is not that they are great at generating code themselves. I'm more and more convinced that I'm not going to be replaced as a software engineer by these tools. But what they are great at is they're great at what software engineers call rubber ducking, which is, hey, I'm trying to think of something and I'm not sure quite how to make it work. What would you suggest? And then the language model, ChatGPT or Bard or whatever, will suggest a solution for you. And it might or might not be correct, or it might even be pretty incorrect, but it'll get you thinking along a new direction, right? So it's like having a colleague that you can talk to and say, hey, do you have any ideas about this? And they come back with something and it's like, no, that's not right. But you know what? Your wrong answer gives me an idea that sends me in the right direction. The other thing that language models are really great for is doing operations on existing text. So for example, translation. Here's some words in one language. Tell me what the words would be in another language. It's great at that. It can answer questions, although it's better at answering questions about a specific block of text than it is about answering factual questions in the world at large. And we can talk a little bit about that too. Great for generating, rough drafts of a blog post, or great for generating an outline for a report that you want to write or something like that. Good at sentiment analysis. So, I'm sure we're going to see a whole lot more of this. Hey, our company gets 10,000 emails a day. We want to know what most people are talking about, or if customers are happy or unhappy about things. Large language models are great at that kind of stuff. And great at summarization. Language models can be really good at saying, here's 3 paragraphs of text. Can you please turn this into 1 paragraph of text for me? They're pretty good at that kind of stuff too. And then I included this the screenshot of this little diary here. This was an interesting project by someone at the Library of Congress who came up with a really cool use case for ChatGPT, which was summarizing the day books of Susan B. Anthony. So Susan B. Anthony, during her life, kept what she called day books, and they were literally just a few sentences she would write about whatever happened to her on every single day of her life. And of course, the Library of Congress has these, and they have already been transcribed into text form. But the problem with them is they are very inconsistent in format. Sometimes the date is written one way, sometimes the date is written another way. Sometimes various locations are mentioned, but they're mentioned by city versus state, or state versus region of the country, or whatever. And so this guy, Matt Miller, went through and asked ChatGPT to normalize these into a structured format, and had him convert them into JSON format with fields for the date, and fields for locations mentioned, and fields for the text that was written, and things like that, and had some really good results. You can see them on his website. This is mattmiller.com if you're interested in checking that out. So real interesting potential application for these generative text language models. That's it for the presentation portion of this. I expect there to be a lot of questions, and we can kind of go from there on the questions. But real quick shout out for the certificate in product management class that I teach part of. The next version of this class is coming up next week, Monday through Wednesday. Definitely check us out on the Georgetown SCS website if you would be interested in attending that. Jonathan, do we have any questions yet?
Just 1 second here.
Sorry if I took you a little by surprise.
No. I just have my cat here that's trying to get in the way of everything. Well, I have a question first that I am interested in, and so I'll kick it off with that. I just want to know, when do you think it would be appropriate for, if you're kind of looking through AI or salami, as you call it, to dedicate either resources or even like to pivot to incorporate it into a strategy?
I mean, I don't think it's too early to start either of those things. Definitely think now is a great time to be experimenting with these tools and seeing what they can do for you, and coming up with clever ideas. If there's a specific use case for your company or agency that you work for, where these kind of generative tools would be a really valuable addition to the product or a valuable addition to your workflow, I think now's the time to go ahead and start experimenting with that. I mean, the great thing about them is that these companies are offering them up for free, right? And part of the reason they do that is for the publicity, and part of the reason they do that is to help train the models even better. So you can get on ChatGPT or Bard or any of these other ones and just start using them today and see how it works for you. As well as, there are paid plans for ChatGPT in particular, I'm thinking. And once you have a paid plan for ChatGPT, you can get an API key. And once you have an API key, you can start making procedural calls. So you could start building software today that calls the ChatGPT API in order to generate text for you. So I think the time is now to be exploring these things.
Great. So I would just want to invite everyone, if you have questions, just please put them in the chat feature here, and we will get to them here in the order that we receive them. So I'll just pause for 1 second for people if they want to put them in there. But while we do that, let's see. So from what I see, there is definitely a lot of caution that you're putting out here, as well as, and what do you think the biggest takeaway would be for any, and you said earlier in there that probably a boss or something wants to go with the next fad. What would be the biggest takeaway to introduce any caution to them?
Well, the main caution I would have is that these tools because they don't actually have a mind of their own, they're just predictive tools based on existing text. All they're doing is, generating sentences that are probable, that would fit within the corpus that they've been trained on, which is the internet. And the internet has a lot of stuff on it, both good stuff and bad stuff. And in my own personal experiments with these tools, it's been interesting to me to find gaps in their knowledge. And to ask them factual questions. They often get factual questions wrong. Things like if you ask ChatGPT to summarize your favorite episode of a TV show that you really like, one you really know well, or a book that you really, really know well, like it'll come up with a kind of plausible description, right? Like if you ask it, describe the 5th episode of the 7th season of whatever TV show, it'll come up with something that sounds like an episode summary for that TV show. But if you really know that episode well, you'll realize it's not quite right because the facts aren't quite right in there. And so, and then of course, there have been a lot of reports, I'm sure you've all seen, of, bias creeping into these tools. And these companies are working overtime to try to filter, the input that you put in so that, they don't get more news stories of scandalous responses that the AIs generate. But by their nature, the AIs are just, I'm calling them AIs, I'm falling for it. The large language models are just looking in their corpus of text for probable next words. And so it's not that hard, if you really try, to trick them into saying something terrible, because somewhere on the internet, there are terrible things that it has read. So that would be my caution, is just that, basically these tools are still in their infancy. What they're doing is just predictive text, plausible text rather than factual text. It's very easy for these tools to fool us into thinking they actually know things, but they don't really know anything except probability distributions for words. And using that, they're able to construct, very coherent sentences and paragraphs, but it's a mistake to assume that means that it's factual or good information. So that would be my main caution to the boss who's asking for AI and the tools.
Great, thank you. All right, I have a question here from Francine. She wants to know, or I assume, are robots a part of the current AI revolution?
Actually, this is a really good question, because the answer is basically yes and no. A lot of this, the technology for these generative AIs is actually a descendant of machine vision research. For years and years and years, scientists have been trying to get robots to be able to see at some basic level, just to be able to roll across a room with a couple of obstacles. And that turns out to be a phenomenally difficult problem. We didn't anticipate it to be a huge problem because it's easy for us, but it turns out that programming a computer from scratch to, not trip over a box on the floor is a huge problem. This current generation of stuff that is generating all the hype is actually not robots. It's just text generators, image generators, and things like that. Robotic research continues to be ongoing. Teams like was it Boston Dynamics that builds the robotic mules and dogs and stuff is having some interesting results, and there are groups out there that are building the kind of humanoid robots. But those have not advanced that much in the last, they shouldn't denigrate the research efforts of those teams. They're working hard and doing a lot of interesting stuff, but no, this is completely different than building actual robots.
Okay.
Although the neural research that contributed to this is kind of an offshoot of robot research.
All right, great. She says, thank you. So, well, if anyone has any last second questions, put them in there, because otherwise we're going to kind of wrap this up here. Daniel says, great information, thank you. And so just reiterate here, if you are interested in learning more about product management, we do have a certificate that we offer. Of course, we're not going to hype it too much here, but the information's there. It's a three-day event. And with that, I think we have everything covered here. So thank you, Craig. Thank you very much for your expertise and agreeing to do a presentation on products and AI. And everybody, thank you for attending and have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.